Hey everybody, welcome to the Briefing Room. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. Great to have you with us on this Thursday. We're tracking the fallout from Robert Mueller's surprise appearance yesterday to wrap up his report and submit his resignation to the Justice Department. We'll get to that. We'll talk to yet another 2020 Democratic presidential contender who stopped by the briefing room. John Hickenlooper is here, and we'll take a closer look at that Louisiana abortion bill, which is getting signed into law today. We talk to the Democratic author of that bill coming up, but we start with the push for impeachment of President Trump and the big questions in the wake of Robert Mueller's report. Will Democrats open an impeachment inquiry? Will they demand that Mueller come and appear before them? And how will voters view all of this now that we're 2 years into this investigation? President Trump, a short time ago, made clear where he stands. Take a listen.
Well, I think it was the same as the report. There wasn't much change. It was, to me, the same as the report. And there's no obstruction. You see what we're saying. There's no obstruction. There's no collusion. There's no nothing. It's nothing but a witch hunt. This is a witch hunt by the media and the Democrats.
Do you believe that Russia helped you get elected?
No, Russia did not help me get elected. You know who got me elected? You know who got me elected? I got me elected. Russia didn't help me at all. Russia, if anything, I think, helped the other side.
Of course, that's not exactly what Robert Mueller found in his 400-page report, but we're joined now by our crack team of reporters. Our senior congressional correspondent, Mary Bruce, is here. Catherine Faulders, our investigative reporter. And from New York, our Capitol Hill reporter, Ben Siegel, who's doing some reporting up there today, is standing by. But, Mary, I want to start with you because everybody's wondering now what's next in all of this. The ball is clearly in Congress's court. The big question is, will Democrats open an inquiry? What would that actually look like?
Yeah, what are they going to do now that Mueller has made very clear that what comes next is up to Congress? Look, opening an impeachment inquiry isn't something that happens just with a snap of a finger, right? There is a process here. That process would begin in the House Judiciary Committee. That's Chairman Nadler who would make that first move. Of course, that would happen with the blessing of Nancy Pelosi. None of this is happening, in silos. Leadership has to make this decision. And then what really makes this so challenging is that even if this passes out of the committee, even if the House approves, an impeachment process, you still would, in order to impeach the president, in order for this effort to be successful, you would have to get Republican support in the Senate. That is an incredibly tall order, and that is part of the reason that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is now in such a tricky position, right? Because impeachment is a risky political gamble. It could backfire on Democrats, and they know that. But Nancy Pelosi now, there is no question, is facing mounting pressure from within her own caucus. And so while for now she says that they are going to, be cautious, she says they need to continue their investigation. She says they need to build an ironclad case, and that's because she wants to make sure she has Republicans on board if they do make this step. At the same time, Pelosi knows that this essentially trying to have it both ways can only last so long.
Complicated, divisive. We hear her talk about it all the time. Only one Republican publicly so far,
yeah, that's
Justin
not going to cut it.
has come forward. But Ben Siegel, you've been tracking the number of Democrats who have gone on the record of this. Break down the numbers for us. In the House of Representatives, how many Democrats have actually come out publicly and said Nancy Pelosi should actually move forward, Jerry Nadler should move forward with impeachment, as Mary talked about?
Devin, impeachment is bubbling in the House Democratic caucus, but we're not at that boiling point. According to our count, just about 46 House Democrats say that the House should start the impeachment process. To put that in some context for you, there are 435 members in the House, about 230 House Democrats. So that's roughly 1 in 5 House Democrats and 1 in 10 House members. That's hardly a majority of the Democrats that Pelosi would need. And also, most importantly, as Mary was pointing to, Pelosi has not budged on this. The Speaker of the House is the one who has control of her caucus, and she has been surprisingly consistent before and after Special Counsel Robert Mueller's comments about where they go next. And where she wants them to go is stay the course on investigations. And all the members that we've seen, those 50-odd members who are supporting impeachment, these are some of the usual suspects. There are no surprise names on that list.
So just to underscore, 45 Democrats, 10% of the total number of House Democrats have called for this. That's a pretty small number, Mary Bruce.
That is not, it's far from a critical mass that is going to be needed to try and force Pelosi to change her mind here. And while she's saying, she's urging caution for now, she isn't closing the door. She isn't saying no to impeachment. She's leaving all options on the table. But in order for her to shift her viewpoint on this, she's going to need to see more than 40.
That's some really important context as we talk about building pressure on Pelosi. It's still quite low, but there are some options, Catherine Faulders, short of impeachment that Democrats can pursue is the what's next to Mueller. One of those things is, of course, to drag him in front of Congress. It's not entirely clear what they would get out of that, but there's a lot of talk about
Right,
that.
and a lot of Democrats, they haven't given specific steps to this yet on what's next with Mueller. I know that those conversations are obviously happening, but they still want to hear from him. Adam Schiff has come out and said he wants to hear from him. Nadler still wants to hear from him, too, but he did back away a little bit from whether he would subpoena Mueller for his testimony and drag him up. But I was just talking to a source on the committee that says, look, Nadler still doesn't know about subpoenaing him. They haven't made a decision yet, but said, quote, Nadler is feeling the heat. We must have Mueller even if he sits there and reads the full report. Now, you know, Mueller said yesterday that the report is his testimony, so I'm not quite sure what good that would do, but that's where they stand.
Well, and Mueller made very clear that he does not want to come in and testify, and the chairman has made clear that he's not really eager to drag him in against his will either. So they still want to hear from him, but it's hard to see how that's going to happen.
As you said, I mean, again, to zoom out to 35,000 feet here, it is an important point not to lose sight of, which you made, Mary, which is it's almost certain that President Trump will not get removed from office through impeachment proceedings because it would take the Republican-controlled Senate. Everybody knows the likelihood of that happening is extremely slim to none. So people are wondering what would the point of this process be, and not only looking at what's happening within the Democratic caucus, but what's happening in public opinion. And we know there things are not, right now at least, in the favor of impeachment.
Yeah, and Nancy Pelosi has made very clear it's not just Republican buy-in that she needs, but she needs public support. She needs to feel that the country wants this move. And that's because, of course, this is a political decision as well, right? It's not just about whether or not Congress is holding the president accountable for committing a possible crime, but it's about the politics of all of this and the ramifications of that, especially with the presidential election around the corner. Pelosi doesn't want to make that move in just a vacuum. She wants to feel that she has Republican support and the support of the American public.
And I think the president today was asked about this, and before he wouldn't really say the word. He'd say that's the I word. Now today he said that's a dirty, awful word, that they shouldn't impeach this president who's doing all sorts of great things. But behind the scenes, too, just talking to some of his advisors, they're kind of welcoming this, right? They think exactly what you said. They need that Republican support.
And that's one of the arguments that Democratic leaders make. It's why they're being cautious in this fight, because Nancy Pelosi has said repeatedly the president's trying to goad us into this. Democrats are very concerned that impeaching the president could be good for the president's base, that it could energize the president and his supporters and could backfire on Democrats.
We'll see where all of this goes. Mary Bruce, thank you so much. We'll see you on World News Tonight. And joining us now and picking up where Mary left off on the phone is billionaire Democratic activist Tom Steyer. He is one of the loudest voices in the impeachment movement, the founder of the organization Need to Impeach, which claims 8 million American supporters and donors in this cause. One of the organizations heaping pressure on Nancy Pelosi. Tom Steyer, thank you so much for joining us on the phone. So I guess the big question for you is, what do you make of Pelosi's hold the line, wait and see, only pursue something that would get results approach to this?
Well, I think that the right way to think about this whole question, first of all, is a question of right and wrong. That what's going on here is we have a president who's corrupt, who has clearly obstructed justice. Mr. Mueller, in effect, told us that straightforwardly yesterday, and that it is the only organization, institution in our society that can hold this president to account is the Congress of the United States, and it is their duty, in fact, to make sure that a corrupt president who is acting against the interests of the American people should be removed from office. So my first point is this is an actual duty of the Congress to perform to safeguard our system.
Do you still think they should pursue it, Tom? Do you still think they should pursue it if it ultimately, as we were just discussing, likely won't go anywhere in the Republican-controlled Senate? If, you know, I mean, is it essentially a waste of time, as Nancy Pelosi seems to be suggesting, to go through the process if it won't achieve the accountability that you're talking about?
Well, let me make 2 points about that, if I might. First of all, I think that not normalizing this president's criminal behavior is very important. Otherwise, you're saying this is the new norm for a president. You can ignore the law. You can ignore subpoenas from Congress. You can refuse to allow anyone to testify. You can even tell Congress that I won't deal with you if you're doing something that I don't like. So, in effect, it's very important to do the right thing in a system so that the system itself has integrity. Second of all, we represent 8 million people plus who've signed our petition. We believe that the power in the United States should be and does lie with the American people, that this is a movement, and that when the American people, be across the board, Democrats, Republicans, and independents, when they see on TV exactly how corrupt this administration is, the cover-up they've engaged in, the behaviors they're currently engaging in contrary to their sworn duty to the country right now, Americans will be disgusted. And that's what will change the Senate vote in the future, is that American people,
and Tom Steyer,
their constituents will force them to change.
And you're going to no doubt keep up the heat with your need to impeach movement, I take it?
We will. Look, we believe that this is the tip of the spear to reforming a broken system in Washington, D.C. They can't even acknowledge that there's a terrible wrong at the heart of our system. And that's endemic to everything else.
Tom Steyer, thank you so much for your time, sir. I'm sorry we are out of time, but thank you for calling in. Appreciate it very much. Joining us now here at the Rim is our Serena Marshall, who was just out speaking of public opinion, tracking public opinion,
yes,
getting
by no means a scientific poll here.
We saw the poll numbers, and Tom Steyer is a nice segue because he's trying to impact public opinion. We see the ads on TV all the time. What are people telling you when you went out today, talked to a bunch of tourists from across the country? We see it most there in our latest poll are opposed to this.
You know, it was really interesting, Devin. The people I spoke to pretty much represented those latest poll numbers. We had about half of them saying that they reinforced their beliefs, that they stand by what they thought pretty much before Mueller came out and spoke. Some of them told us that they believe that Mueller was prodding Congress to get some action. A lot of people who didn't want to talk on camera told us that they actually didn't follow it at all and that there are other issues that are more important to them.
And we do have a little flavor of that. Let's listen to it.
I don't have much of an opinion of what I think Congress should do. I haven't given it a lot of thought, but I think either doing nothing or doing something, either way they're choosing.
Are you ready? Do you care at all yet about the 2020 election?
For sure. Yes, I've been following.
Mueller's already said that he's not going to say more on Capitol Hill. He said all he's going to say, I would like to see the president impeached.
You want to see Congress go straight to impeachment?
Absolutely. That's their job.
Why do you think they need to move that way?
I think that the Mueller report said, I've done all I can do. I'm going to hand it off to the body whose job it is to take the next step. That's Congress.
Well, he didn't say, I didn't find him guilty, but I didn't find him innocent. So now Congress has a door. Listen to Mueller. Congress has got a door and they can go through and let's try it for impeachment before the 2020 election.
You think that that's what?
All right, so a big mix of opinions. It was great to hear a little of
yeah.
those, and we will see, as that lady said there at the end, this is up to Congress, and we're out of time on this topic. But thank you so much, Serena Marshall, for bringing us a flavor of public opinion today. Several Democratic candidates for president have also been weighing in. In fact, a growing number of them now are supportive of impeachment efforts against President Trump up on Capitol Hill. One of those who changed his view recently, Governor John Hickenlooper of Colorado, stopped by here just a short time ago in the briefing room.
Well, I wanted to hear from Mr. Mueller himself. I'm generally more cautious. I refer to myself sometimes as a radical or an extreme moderate. But I think we heard a couple things yesterday. One that we'd heard before, that if Mr. Mueller could have exonerated the president, he would have. But he also laid the responsibility for an investigation clearly at the threshold of Congress. And I think at this point, I think it would be crazy not to go forward and open an impeachment inquiry and at least be able to get the real facts. And that doesn't mean we're going to file articles of impeachment or try to impeach President Trump tomorrow or maybe ever. But I think we owe it to the American people to try and make sure we get all the facts. And
Well, and I want to ask you about that because, Bob Mueller has spent over 2 years assembling the facts. He's had a team of dozens of attorneys, 500 search warrants, subpoenas, and the like. I mean, obviously, you've seen the report, more than 400 pages of facts. I mean, what additional facts do you think are still out there that we need to gather?
Well, certainly, Mr. Mueller indicated he thought there were other places where he wasn't able to go. And I think that, again, we've got to keep our eyes focused on the prize, right? I mean, I can't imagine Mitch McConnell is ever going to let Donald Trump be impeached. So Democrats we have to realize we're going to win at the ballot box. We're going to have to focus on that and make sure we have the kitchen table issues that American people expect from us. But we still, I think, have an obligation to go and get the facts around this case so people understand what really happened.
So you've been in this race now, Governor, for a little over 3 months. You were you're from Colorado, former governor. I think a lot of people know that about you. You're sort of moving out of the get-to-know-you stage in this crowded field. And, you know, I was struck by a couple times in the last 24 hours, you've described yourself as an extreme moderate. You just said a radical moderate. What does that mean?
Oh, I think by that it means I'm someone who actually tries to get progressive things done. I mean, I'm running for president because I believe this country is facing a national crisis of division. I think Trump is fueling that. And I think what we've done in Colorado, where we've gotten to almost universal health care, where we've created the #1 economy in the country, where we beat the NRA with tough new gun laws. I mean, those progressive accomplishments didn't come by accident, right? We've been able to bring people together, Republicans and Democrats, business and nonprofits, and really get the big progressive things done that people didn't think could be done.
You're headed to California. One thing that caught our eye was this billboard. Take a look. One of your competitors, Elizabeth Warren, who's certainly a strong progressive in this race, has just put up this billboard in the heart of tech country. She wants to break up big tech. She's looking for supporters right there in Silicon Valley. What do you make of that plan? Do you support putting new restrictions on the likes of Amazon and Facebook? Do you think they're too big and need to be broken up?
Well, I think we definitely need more competition in this country. If you look back over the last 20 years, the number of new businesses started every year has gone down consistently. And those business startups are the heartbeat of new jobs and better jobs. So whether it's the big tech companies or whether it's, you know, so many industries where there are just 2 or 3 companies that totally dominate the industry, we've got to bring competition back into the open markets of America.
Finally here, about the biggest issue of the past couple of weeks in our political discourse, and that's the issue of abortion. Today we're seeing Louisiana, as you know, with a Democratic governor, Democratic members of the state legislature there pass into law one of these fetal heartbeat bills. How is there room right now in the Democratic Party for pro-life members, and how do you bridge that divide between these strongly held pro-life beliefs, particularly in the South, and your values?
Well, it's tough. I mean, this is becoming it seems like a constant assault on women's inalienable right to control their own bodies. And what we see in Alabama, Indiana, even Missouri, it's horrific. I mean, it's hard to believe that that's what's happening. In Colorado, we went a different route. We actually expanded access to health care. We provided long-acting reversible contraception, so things like IUDs, to young women all across the state. And we actually reduced teenage abortion by 64%, and we reduced teenage pregnancy by 54%. But at the same time, we saved the Colorado taxpayers $70 million. When my goal as president would be to expand that across America and make sure that every woman has that expanded access to health care.
It sounds like that's a strategy on your part to make abortion less necessary than it might otherwise be?
Well, exactly. What drives me crazy is that these people that are so fanatically against abortion, when they close down so many of these clinics, they're actually limiting women's access to family planning, to decide when they want to have a family. And that's the opposite of providing freedom. That's taking some level of freedom away from these women, especially women from lower income backgrounds.
And if you were president, Governor Hickenlooper, what should be done to prevent that access from being rolled back in so many of these states? What could you do? What would you do?
Well, immediately, as I said, we would expand the budget of what they call Title X, which expands health care through community health centers and other clinics and other institutions, expands that health care access to low-income people all over the country. But I think also we need to get control of the Senate and make sure that we can pass legislation that guarantees Roe versus Wade doesn't get overturned, and we can legislate some of the things that are under attack now in states all across the country.
Governor John Hickenlooper, thanks so much for coming on ABC News Live.
Thank you.
And as we talked about there with the governor, one of the states today that's taking new steps to roll back abortion rights in this country is Louisiana, becoming the 5th state just this year to pass a so-called heartbeat bill, banning abortions after something like 5 or 6 weeks when a heartbeat, fetal heartbeat, is detected. What makes this case so unique, Catherine, is that this bill was not only supported by state Democrats in Louisiana, it was written by a Democrat and will be signed today by the state's Democratic Governor, John Bel Edwards. And we're joined now by the sponsor of the legislation, the author of the legislation, State Senator John Milkovich. He is a Democrat from Shreveport, Louisiana. Sir, thank you so much for coming on. It's great to see you. I wanted to ask you about how this bill sort of sails into the legal fray. Why did you enact something and push something that seems so at odds with decades of Supreme Court precedent, and what do you hope the court will do?
Devin, the sight of members of two state legislatures cheering the legalization of late-term abortions has galvanized Americans. That sight has rocked the moral infrastructure of our nation to the core. Believe it or not, of course, this is outside Washington, D.C., outside the Beltway, and outside, apparently, the paradigms of Governor Hickenlooper. People are concerned in America about the wholesale slaughter of babies. Let's get to the facts. We've had 60 million babies, unborn babies in America that have been slaughtered in the abortion mills. And if the American people are standing up very definitively, and we've seen it in at least 5 state houses so far, and actually it's an ongoing battle for decades, and people are saying we're tired of the wholesale slaughter of the next generation of Americans, and in Louisiana, the next generation of Louisianans. And we're willing and determined at this point to take the fight to the abortion industry.
And I hear that very passionately, and so many of the beliefs on both sides of this are deeply held, sincerely held. And I guess the follow-up question I have is on the legal side of this. Your law, no doubt, will face legal challenges. Many of these bans of the past few weeks have also been tied up in the courts. Do you see new hope in this conservative majority on the Supreme Court? What is it about the court? Is it Kavanaugh? Is it Gorsuch? Is it something in the way you wrote the bill that gives you hope that this would succeed?
Well, we have several things going on. Number one, I am a legislator. It's my job to enact just constitutional life-protecting bills regardless, and not ask the federal courts for a litmus test before I pass a bill. We're doing our job, even if the federal courts are not always doing theirs. Obviously, many Americans, many millions of Americans believe that there have been several justices appointed to the United States Supreme Court who take a common sense approach, who respect the actual letter of the United States Constitution, and who respect human life. And obviously, we're very hopeful that these new justices have brought new life, a new perspective, and that they're willing to strike Roe versus Wade, and they're willing to stand up for the life of the unborn. And I will remind you, there is nothing in the Constitution that gives the government the right to kill babies or parents. There's nothing in the Constitution which states that state governments cannot protect the unborn. There's nothing in the text of the United States Constitution which states that unborn babies do not have a right to live. So we are actually asking that the text of the Constitution prevail over unsupported jurisprudence, which is not based on the bedrock terms of the United States Constitution. And we're saying we are willing to fight for our babies. We believe abortion is murder. We're drawing a line in the sand, and that's not just speaking for me. That's speaking for many millions of Americans.
And a lot of Democrats in Louisiana. And I guess sort of the last question we have for you, and one of the reasons that your story, your bill, and what's happening in your state is so fascinating is the politics behind this. You know, can you see yourself supporting any of the Democratic nominees right now running for president in light of their positions on this?
Listen, I guess you're out now. We're shifting topics to presidential politics. I've written a book about the corruption of Robert Mueller, which goes back 30 years. I don't agree with everything that President Trump has done, but I believe that President Trump, I have supported him, and I am supporting him because Donald Trump is an outsider. He's a maverick. He's a cowboy. He's an anti-establishment. He's not part of the deep state establishment, and he has rattled a lot of cages and ruffled a lot of waters and basically taken on the corrupt intransigence of Washington, D.C. And I believe that there's a growing number of Americans that see that. And one of the things that he's taken a stand on is that he's taken a stand on it's time for us to stop murdering unborn babies in America.
And we hear that loud and clear. John Milkovich, Louisiana state senator, the author of the Louisiana Heartbeat Bill that Governor John Bel Edwards will sign into law today. Sir, thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your views. Important to hear them, and we appreciate your time very much.
Devin, thank you for your courtesy. I appreciate you allowing me a chance to state my views. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. All right, moving on now to this controversy surrounding the USS John McCain, Catherine, something that has ignited a new debate in this town about Senator John McCain, the late senator. You're seeing pictured there the Navy destroyer named after the late senator's grandfather and his father, both of them Navy admirals, also has the namesake of the senator himself, of course. ABC News has learned that prior to President Trump's trip to Japan over Memorial Day weekend, the Navy was directed to move it out of sight and cover up the name of the ship. Our senior Pentagon reporter, Louis Martinez, has been all over this story from the start and joins us now. Louis, so break this down for us. What actually happened? What was the directive from the White House with respect to this ship, and what did the Navy do about it?
Right, Devin. What we believe happened is that there was an email that was sent by a staffer in the White House military office, sent to the relevant commands, in this case, of the 7th Fleet at Yokosuka, which is right there in Tokyo Bay. That happens to be where the USS John S. McCain is. One of the things that was requested by that office was that, quote, the ship be put out of sight. Essentially so that when President Trump visited there for Memorial Day, that it would not be seen. So what ended up happening is that we understand there were initial discussions about what to do about this, and so one of the things that resulted was the veiling of the name of the ship at the stern, at the back part of the ship there where it says USS John S. McCain. A tarp was placed over it. A photo appeared, was taken on Friday. That was the day that tarp was placed. The next day, senior leaders at that base saw what had happened and said that is not going to continue. We want all the ships in port for the president's visit to look exactly the same, and that means we're going to take away that tarp. So this was you could say, a political move, or being aware of the president's non-affection for Senator McCain, and therefore somebody took it into their own hands to request that the military move the ship, but that's not feasible because, as we know, the ship is undergoing major repairs right now. So when the next best thing in this case was that a tarp was placed over the name, and then the next day it was removed, so that when the president did arrive, it was completely uncovered.
All right, Louis Martinez, getting to the bottom of that. A lot more coming up on World News Tonight and on abcnews.com. Louis, thank you so much. This has stirred up so much debate, Catherine. The president denies knowing anything about this.
Oh, right, and people are calling on folks to resign over this at the Department of Defense. But look, the president said this morning when he spoke with us on the South Lawn that he doesn't know what happened. He wasn't involved, but at the same time, he called this person, who he said he didn't know. He told our Terry Moran that this person was, quote, well-meaning. I asked him later on during that exchange that you see right there if he is going to apologize, if the White House is going to apologize for that in any way. He told me that he certainly can't apologize because he knew nothing about it. He said that this person who was behind it, as Louis noted, email from the White House military office to the Navy, that this person was probably, quote, doing me a favor.
Yeah, and we know that families, let's not forget that the USS John S. McCain was involved in a tragic, deadly accident just a couple of years ago. Lost the lives of 10 sailors, including one Petty Officer First Class Kevin Bushell, whose mother, Karen Bushell, has just told ABC News that she is bothered by the president's engagement on this, thinks the president should have focused on that loss of life when he was in Japan. And in this statement to ABC, makes this comment that what should have been the focus of the president being in Japan and near the McCain was not his tender ego, but rather the lives of those lost. Our hats hats off to those 10 sailors, to those service members who gave their lives in that accident. We salute them here. And as we end today in the briefing room, here are their faces. We want to remember those 10 service members from the USS McCain killed in that accident in August 2017. Thank you so much for joining us. A packed show today. Great to have Catherine Faulders with us. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. We'll see you tomorrow, 3:30 Eastern Time, right here on ABC News Live.